Yeah, there's a little scruff. I think yeah. So I think we're live now.
We are live. Okay. Well, welcome to the weekly roundabout of the American Prospect. It is both hurricane season and election season. And because it is election season, your normal host, David Dayan, is schlepping as we speak to Montana to cover what may be the last best hope, or whether it's best, it's not clear, but possibly last hope for the Democrats to cling to the Senate. So I am hosting today's weekly roundup. I'm Harold Meyerson, the editor at large of the American Prospect, and I am joined by writing fellow Luke Goldstein, who has just returned from states where there are some close races, and we will be talking about that. But as I said, we will focus on initially Hurricane Week and then election week and go from there. So
A lot of topics. Yeah.
yes, yeah,
Also,
obvious.
I think we have to note that this week we got the Los Angeles natives taking over the weekly show.
There you go. And as soon as we're done, Luke and I are both going out surfing. So I just want
I wish.
folks
Yeah.
to appreciate that. The Potomac isn't great for, its waves, but we'll do the best we can.
It might be a
Uh,
little
there,
cold this time of
there were
year. Yeah.
certainly waves in Florida this week, not only on the Gulf Coast, but apparently from Hurricane Milton, much of the destruction actually was on or near the Atlantic coast. This being a not only a devastating hurricane, but a rather idiosyncratic one as to where it produced damage. But in that, it follows the pattern of Hurricane Helene, for which all the warnings went up for the Florida Gulf Coast, and no one was expecting it to wreak havoc in western North Carolina. There have been some interesting pieces that the Prospect has run the last few days about Milton. David Dayan, before he began his Montana trek, noted that the Hurricane Helene knocked out a factory of a company called Baxter International, which makes IV bags, and that the IV bag production is so concentrated among just a handful of companies that this, caused a national shortage of IV bags, so that we have to import a number of them, a great number of them on an emergency basis from Europe. And David also noted that we've had this problem before, also with Baxter International, when its plants in Puerto Rico were knocked out by an earlier hurricane. So it's not like we don't know this. It's just that we don't do anything about it, and it's reflective of the monopolized state of much of the American economy. Luke, some thoughts
Yeah.
on
Well,
hurricane?
yeah. So in addition to the IV bags, there's also a major fertilizer plant near Tampa that had to be, evacuated during the Milton storm. I don't know that the damage is, it seems it's not quite as bad, but they're going to be significantly behind schedule for several weeks because of this. And same thing, it's one of the largest fertilizer production sites that's based in the U.S. So it's going to set agriculture behind, might even lead to higher grocery prices down the line if the cost of fertilizer goes up because of this. And I think there's somewhat of a larger point here. I mean, we've written a lot about supply chain consolidation and the crunches during the pandemic, and I think that there was a kind of a real recognition coming out of that by some policymakers that this was a problem. Consolidated production in the U.S. or abroad creates a lot of vulnerabilities and fragility. One rebuttal at the time to that was like, yeah, but a pandemic, come on, like it's a once in a lifetime event. And I think what these events really underscore, that was kind of being missed by that, is another reason that you want to diversify production is because we're going to unfortunately have more of these extreme, weather events and conditions moving forward. And despite, I think some efforts by policymakers to change things, when it comes to semiconductors and other sectors, there's just a lot more, work to be done, as has been shown by these storms.
As far as semiconductors, it was about 20 years ago that a guy named Barry Lin noted that they were all being produced in Taiwan and that
Right.
Taiwan is in an earthquake zone. And if a really bad earthquake hit Taiwan, so much for our ability to build and service computers of all
Yeah.
kinds. Now, to its credit, part of the Chips and Science Act of the Biden administration has been to lead to construction of semiconductor and fab plants here in the United States. So since you referenced some efforts, I think that may be one of the most notable efforts to deal with supply chain concentration. But um, when you stack it up against all the supply chain concentrations. It's unfortunately just a drop in the bucket,
Yeah.
but it's a good drop, and we need obviously more of those. One thing that has not been narrowly concentrated during the hurricane season is conspiracy theories, which have abounded in the form of attacks on FEMA, which actually originated, with the Trump campaign and then spread to the conspiracy-minded right-wing social media universe. Some of which, in classic Marjorie Taylor Greene fashion, also suggested that the particular FEMA miscreants were Jewish people who worked in various parts of FEMA. So, we are not immune, to put it mildly, from this kind of conspiratorial thinking, which is the sort of thing that, among other things, arises in the absence of fact-checked mainstream media. God knows there ain't the number of local newspapers that there used to be. And this is the sort of world into which some section of this nation has been plunged. Uh, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I mean it's always hard to know with these stories that start and circulate online. They're fabricated, that get a lot of traction. It's like, how much is there real world impact if people think that FEMA officials are trying to assassinate them, which was like one that's going out. And I mean, I think it's somewhat hard to know, but it's concerning that there are you know like public figures, politicians who amplify this stuff, because it could have some sort of impact on the ground when people don't really know fully what the conditions are.
Yeah,
Uh,
and rescue workers in Western North Carolina and elsewhere have experienced people who have these fears and phobias as a result of this stuff that's being posted. So there are some consequences. Well, on the ground, as it were, you have just returned from to switch to the election season. You've just returned from both New Hampshire and New Jersey, where you were looking at some particular races. So tell us a little bit about what those races were and what you found and what the significance is of what you found.
yeah. So, full disclosure here, I'm still wrapping up some of the reporting for these dispatches. So you're gonna get some of I'm kind of gonna just lay my notebook out there. I'm gonna workshop some of this. But
Consider this a preview.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a prospect exclusive, behind the curtain, I guess. So yeah, I was just up in the Northeast, in New Hampshire and New Jersey. And I have kind of a loose theme for the series I'm working on, covering these races. There's somewhat of a, I think, emerging trend this election, um, where there are a lot of Democratic candidates who are running in purplish swing districts that the party has to try to win over to take back the House here. um, who are taking kind of an unconventional strategy compared to past years, where they're really leaning into populist platforms, especially on economic issues. And this has sort of been not quite the same like mold in previous years, where candidates in these districts would more so focus on moderating or maybe becoming more conservative. And there's a whole kind of handful of races where this is playing out. The main one I went to, or the first one, was up in New Hampshire, where Maggie Goodlander is running in New Hampshire's second district. The seat was held by a Democrat, Ann Custer, who
Right.
is now retiring. New Hampshire, though, is still a pretty purplish state, Democratic senators, but the governor Sununu is a Republican. He's been elected to 2 terms. There's always been a real kind of independent streak there. The House Majority PAC is spending a significant amount of money on that race because they have to hold on to it. And Goodlander is a kind of an interesting candidate for this theme, because she most recently was actually working at the Department of Justice Antitrust Division, and was helping devise the litigation strategy for all these sort of trust busting cases that the Biden administration has been bringing. So her task is really to take that work and connect it to the everyday concerns of residents there in New Hampshire. Mainly, it's all surrounded around higher cost of living. So, Goodlander, in line with Kamala Harris as well, is endorsing this federal ban on price gouging, specifically at grocery stores. She's running also on giving antitrust enforcers new tools to go after algorithmic price fixing by cartels of landlords. There's a big case right now against RealPage for doing exactly that. So I met up with the campaign and shadowed them sort of for a day. I went to a house party later that evening, and I think the kind of the guests who were present there is sort of reflective also of who Maggie Goodlander is, because along with this kind of populist streak in her platform, she's a real political insider. So she was an advisor to the White House in the Biden administration before going to the DOJ. She was on the Unity Task Force, which worked on a whole handful of issues. Combating opioid abuse was one of them. She was a national security advisor to Joe Lieberman and John McCain way back. And
which was anything but a populist pedigree.
Right. And I mean that it was many years ago, but yeah, this is her kind of trajectory. And she worked on the Trump impeachments, the first impeachments as well. She's been in and around the political world for a long time. She's also a long time Granite Stater, and she has very deep roots in the state and to the kind of upper political echelons. So at this house party, there was a member of Maggie Hassan's transition team when she was governor. There were 5 different state legislators who were there, and the hosts were a former advisor to Jimmy Carter, who was married to a member of the Walls family, a 9th cousin, twice removed, so somewhat distant, but she does, she talks about this, and it was interesting hearing her, give her stump speech, field a lot of really tough questions from the crowd. There's a very active, civic political culture in New Hampshire because of their early placement in the presidential primaries. I think primarily they were very worried about the Supreme Court, and Maggie Goodlander is actually also a constitutional law professor at University of New Hampshire. So this is sort of part of her candidacy as well. She's endorsing term limits on Supreme Court justices, which is there's some other Democrats like Jerry Nadler who've hinted at this, but it's not like a mainstream position.
And Nadler is the ranking Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee and would be chair of that committee if the Democrats retake. If Maggie Goodlander wins and the Democrats retake the House.
Right. And she wants also like a binding code of ethics, which is a little bit more of the mainstream position here. So she's running against just a Republican opponent here. Surprise. And it's also kind of unconventional here. So the Republican is actually her name's Lily Tang Williams. She was born in mainland China and has since emigrated to the U.S. and is a very kind of intense China hawk. She's very anti the Chinese Communist Party. Um, Maggie Goodlander, another kind of part of her biography is that she's married to Jake Sullivan, who's a national security advisor. In the primaries, the Democratic primaries, Goodlander had a really tough contest. She actually was interviewed once and said that her main criticism of the Biden administration, if she had to have one, is that they haven't been tough enough on China. So there's this kind of dynamic here where this sort of rural New Hampshire district, one of the main flashpoints in their congressional race has to do with China and which candidate can kind of outflank the other on being more of the hawk. So yeah, no, that's that race.
So populism and hawks. What did you find in
Right.
Jersey other than
Yeah. Yeah. So Jersey's a bit different, but kind of follows the same theme. So the Democrat is Sue Altman, who was a longtime leader with the Working Families Party, which is very much the kind of progressive, progressive flank of the
and
Democrat.
where is this district in
New
Jersey?
Jersey 7 is roughly central northern part of the state. It's one of the wealthiest districts in the state, also, which I didn't know until I went out there for this trip. I mean, there are lower income areas, mostly Latino, but a lot of it's kind of suburban residential areas. So like the salt tax deduction, of course, is a kind of a top concern I heard from voters. So Sue Altman, people were a little surprised that she threw her hat and was fielded as the candidate for this race, because it's oh, sorry. So the seat's held by a Republican, Tom Kean, currently. So she's trying to unseat
Who is the son
Republican
of the former governor?
governor.
Is that,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and
with the same name. Yeah.
he was the minority leader in the state Senate for a number of years. Actually challenged Bob Menendez, the now indicted
Right.
long-time Democratic senator, way back many years ago. But he's been in the New Jersey political world. A lot of people would say the machine. He's been the Republican flank of the mostly Democratic controlled machine in the state for a long time. Sue Altman is an anti-corruption reformer, and that's her background with the Working Families Party. She famously had an incident in 2019 where she was kicked out of a state Senate hearing about a tax break that was being fought for by George Norcross, who is one of the kind of corrupt figures.
One of the last of the proud
Yeah.
tradition of New Jersey political bosses, although he's
Right.
never held public office himself.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So, and now things are kind of crumbling for him. New Jersey in general, the whole kind of broader theme, this from Andy Kim in the Senate down to congressional races like Sue Altman, is with the Menendez indictment. There really is this moment of opportunity where it feels like the grip of this longtime party boss operated machine is kind of slipping, and there is an appetite among voters for this wave of reformers. Rob Menendez Jr. did win his primary, which we covered back, but Andy Kim, likely going to be the Senate, likely to be the next senator for that seat is a big deal. And if Sue Altman is able to dethrone Tom Kean here for this seat, that would also be huge. He's getting a lot of money from the Elon Musk America PAC. About $500,000 has been pumped into that race. So she's fighting against some really kind of big money interests there.
Yeah, it's really kind of a handful of northeastern states where there are still vestiges of the old political machines, which really finally have not, you can't really find them in classic form, at least elsewhere in the country. But you go to Massachusetts, you go to New York City. I mean, Eric Adams is sort of the
Right.
product of the rather ossified Democratic club universe, which is not all that unfriendly with the Republican club universe in greater New York. And New Jersey also, which was famously a
Yeah.
boss-run state. Frank Hague, the mayor of Jersey City back in the 30s, was already notorious as kind of the most flagrant of political bosses. And it hasn't really vanished from
Right.
northeastern states, whereas you can't really find it at this juncture, even in Chicago, famously a boss-run city. But eventually the social conditions that lead to the formation of this, which dates back to the mid or even early 19th century, completely vanish. And but they haven't completely vanished in a place like New Jersey.
Yeah, they don't make bosses the way that they used to. Eric Adams is really like the atrophying of the wannabe aspiring party boss. I did, by the
Indeed.
way, I will note because this is going to be my story. I did at a press conference ask Sue Altman about the Eric Adams indictment, given that she has this anti-corruption background, and I couldn't get her to answer really on the record if she was going to support him resigning. I think it is a really tricky dynamic here for the House Democratic field because Hakeem Jeffries
Right.
has said that Eric Adams should not resign yet, though progressives like AOC immediately called for him to do so. So I think a lot of Democrats are kind of whatever they're caught between rock and a hard place here maybe.
Speaking of AOC, if I can
Yeah,
digress, if I can clear my throat and
please.
digress for a moment, she tweeted earlier this week that if the business interests around that back Kamala Harris, if they went after Lena Khan and it looked like Harris was not going, if Harris wins, to reappoint Lena Khan or to keep her on as the head of the Federal Trade Commission, that there would be hell to pay. There would be a real fight. And
Brawl.
that is in some ways illustrative of what is still enduringly the most fundamental difference in the Democratic Party, which has long been the world's foremost cross-class party of both business and labor, so to speak. And to the degree that we can discern these ongoing conflicts there, I think that is maybe perhaps the most prominent flashpoint that we can detect. We only have a few minutes left because you got to go and I got to go. I will note that I'm about to go out to Nevada, where there are also a slew of close races, presidential, senatorial, and somewhat at the House level as well. And I'll be walking around with the some old associates in the hotel union in Vegas, which is a major get out the vote and voter persuasion political instrument of the Democrats in Nevada. So I will be doing that. Speaking of
Yeah.
unions, this has also been uh, a week where again a kind of assertively macho working class union, this time the firefighters, narrowly by a very narrow vote followed the lead, if that's what we want to call it, of the Teamsters in making no endorsement for the in the presidential race. I also want to call.
And they notably, right, had been one of the first unions that endorsed Biden in 2020.
And
Right. That's
they
why it's got a lot of
Yeah,
play. Yeah.
yeah. Well, this is a union with which Northeastern old-time Democratic pols have long had close relations with the leaders of the union. They were actually the
Oh.
first union during the 2004 primaries to endorse John Kerry. Uh, 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 they have new leaders now. And working class union culture is a lot less pervasive with the rate of unionization in the private sector down to 6% is a lot less pervasive than it once was. And that certainly is one of the things that underpins some of the Democrats' trouble with working class, particularly white working class, but not exclusively white working class voters, white, working class male voters in particular, which we see in perhaps some of the more macho culture unions. I would call viewers' attention to a piece in the front page of the business section of the New York Times today about how the NLRB is essentially helping the Teamsters in their campaigns to unionize Amazon drivers because they all drive, and are supervised by Amazon to the nth degree,
They
but
wear Amazon uniforms.
they wear Amazon
They have
uniforms.
logos.
They
Yeah.
drive Amazon trucks. They deliver Amazon packages. They work full time, if not full time plus overtime, and they are surveilled by Amazon cameras that are turned on them as they go about their daily rounds, which sometimes, because there's so much to deliver, are become nightly rounds as well. But almost all of them nominally work for companies that have contracted with Amazon. Now, the NLRB in two different cases has ruled that no, Amazon is really a joint employer, which would greatly, which would certainly help the Teamsters in their campaign, their chief organizing campaign to unionize Amazon. And since those rulings have come down, suddenly the Teamsters have been able to unionize a number of Amazon driving independent companies in Queens and suburban LA and elsewhere. And I point that out because the NLRB under Donald Trump was, just ferociously hostile, essentially, to any union organizing. And when the Teamster president, Sean O'Brien, who again said this week he couldn't think of anything Democrats had done for the Teamsters in the last 40 years, that not only reflects on his deficiencies of memory, it kind of reflects on his apparent refusal to even read the press releases that the Teamsters are putting out praising the NLRB precisely for this. So that's among the paradoxes of working class leadership, at least at the Teamsters. I do
Well, Harold,
believe,
I thought, yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
we have a question. I'm going to take this. I thought you had just on the labor union front, though. I think you had a great point in your one of your pieces this week, and I'm curious to see what your what you hear when you're out in Nevada from Unite Here, because I do think it's true that one kind of under discussed change, along with just the decline in union density, is that a lot of remaining unions don't have the same sort of civic culture among members. There aren't, you know a lot of them leave their job now, and even if they are part of the Teamsters, they go home to their regular neighborhoods, and a lot of working class voters have shifted, right. I mean, this is a broader trend we've written about. But with other unions like Unite Here that seem to have, some kind of, they're more like institutions of solidarity or a culture of that, you might say. Those unions have not, among the rank and file, it seems, moved right as much. I mean, I'm sure there are demographic
Yeah,
differences.
I've been writing about Unite Here in Vegas for many years. I did a big story on them way back for us in 2004. And, one of the things that the workers in that union have done, which is particularly unusual, is understand sometimes that they can make a concession in bargaining if the payoff is the ability to organize another hotel, because what they understand is that union density in a market like Las Vegas is the key to getting good contracts. Right now, they have 60,000 members, which for a local union is huge. and they finally represent every single hotel, big hotel on the Las Vegas Strip. The last one to fall was the one that was owned by Shelton Adelson, but then it was sold to someone else, so they managed to unionize that. Uh, it is kind of they're in a kind of unique situation because they're basically in a one industry town surrounded by desert. And what that means is they kind of understand the town as a distinct organism in which the union is crucial to, making them have livable lives. So it's a very exceptional set of circumstances, which is not the case in a lot of other places. And I would point out
Yeah.
also, so many of the Teamsters, I mean, not the ones who work for UPS, but, they work for a little company here, a little company there. And they may, if they're drivers, they really, they don't have a common work site where they stay for more than a brief period at the beginning or the end of their shift. And so that kind of also erodes the notion of a common union culture. And of course, I always recommend this book that came out last year called Rust Belt Union Blues by Theda Skocpol and Lainey Newman about the disappearance of first steel mills and then union halls throughout Western Pennsylvania, kind of the old culture being the one that you see in the movie The Deer Hunter that was set there, the Michael Cimino movie.
Oh yeah.
And that these all of these little towns where there were previously almost 150 local unions of the steelworkers, there are now just 16 local unions of the steelworkers in Western Pennsylvania. The towns have decayed. There's no union hall, which used to be a social center. You went there for drinks, you went there for weddings, et cetera, et cetera. Those are gone. The only and what this book finds is the only remaining social institutions in those towns, chiefly are gun clubs, and so it's really kind of the disappearance of a world that was based on a kind of social clustering and where your peers, kind of reinforce the general union view of the world. Unfortunately, for working class interests, those are harder and harder to find.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, it seems in some ways kind of like an extension of the, bowling alone thesis. I mean, unions being one, kind of, mass politics institution that's declined along with so many other kind of civic associations and such of that nature and what kind of effect it has on our
Right.
politics.
And I mean, social media is kind of in ways a reductio ad absurdum of that. You sit there by yourself and look at the screen and there's no collective entity that you belong to where some folks might say, well, no, here's what, here's the real story.
Right.
So it goes.
So
Okay.
let me, before I hop
Yeah.
off, I'm going to take this one question from Alan because it's a good one. I have somewhat of an answer. So I do think it's true that the D trip is underinvesting into the Sue Altman race. Um, so I think the Sue Altman campaign feels that they are being somewhat underestimated, somewhat based on internal polling. They just have a much more robust ground game in the district also than, I mean, Tom Cam is basically betting that name recognition, long-time political ties in that state, and the amount of money that he's getting from PACs like the Musk America PAC is going to carry him. And Sue Altman is the total inverse. I think it's more grassroots, and they are. So there's an interesting conflict. She was not endorsed by the AFL CIO, and I'm just going based on what's been previously reported. A lot of the building trades that are in the AFL CIO are not the biggest fans of hers. They were closer with the kind of democratic machine in New Jersey, and I think that's not totally uncommon here. She has a other coalition of labor groups that have rallied in her support. CWA being and SEIU being the main ones. They're doing they're running independent expenditures and have a lot of canvassing they're doing on her behalf. That will be part of my story when it comes out. So stay tuned for that.
In covering primary elections in 2004, I was told by, I think it was 2004. I was told by uh, an official of the New Jersey AFL that the AFL and CIO had not yet merged in New Jersey. The national merger was
Hmm.
1955, for God's sakes. This was 50 years after that. But the more traditional conservative wing of New Jersey labor
Yeah.
had yet to merge with unions like CWA and SEIU. So
What
go figure.
when was this?
2004, for God's sakes.
Yeah, that
49
fits.
years
Right.
after the AFL and CIO merged nationally and every place else except New Jersey.
Hell, I might need to steal that for
Take
my
it,
piece
take
because
it.
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I have to run, everyone, but
Okay, and so
thanks for
we're
joining.
going to
Yeah.
end this abbreviated version of weekly roundup, but we have managed to round up, I think, some interesting points. And if people want to help Sue Altman, that's up to you. But
More to come. Yeah.
yes, yes. Okay, Luke, thank you,
Yep.
and David
Yeah.
et al. We'll see you next week.
Yep.
Bye bye.